This podcast is sponsored by Saltworks Security. For almost 10 years, Saltworks has delivered world-class application security services and products designed to help enterprises secure their applications from policy to production in an ever-changing security landscape. They're the makers of SaltMiner, an application security management platform designed by security professionals for security professionals. SaltMiner aggregates and normalizes the issues found by many different solutions and enriches that data with business context. SaltMiner gives team members from the C-suite, security, and development teams the ability to manage their application security program through customizable views. The Saltworks SaltMiner Community Edition is a free penetration testing management and delivery application. It provides teams with custom reporting for potentially thousands of end users, red team support, and the ability to manage new and retesting of engagements. SaltMiner Community Edition also allows teams to enforce both testing methodologies and custom vulnerability databases for consistency in engagement delivery. Check them out today at saltworks.io. All right. Not a great impression, I know. This is the SMC Journal Podcast, the show that's all about software engineering in today's modern IT and making software better through testing, tuning, monitoring, observability, and security, and much more. I'm Scott Moore, your host. Thank you so much for being with us today. Today's topic is about a fairly new category that Gartner has come out with. They've labeled it Application Security Posture Management. I actually want to show you this on the Gartner website. They released in May an Innovation Insight report for this new category. I'm going to call it ASPM for short. And it's basically a DevOps related security organizational term. In fact, I've got another website that actually defines it a little better here from Inso Security. It says ASPM is an agile AppSec delivery model in which resources, processes, and technologies are effectively employed to lead a high-performance and systematic AppSec program. And a lot of enterprises are trying to do that right now. But what does it actually mean? Now, I gotta be fairly transparent with you. Gartner, you know I love you. You know I love you. But sometimes you don't always get it right. Sometimes you don't know any more than what's going to happen in the AppSec community in 5 years from now than the person that just checked me out at the cash register at the grocery store. But sometimes you actually do get it right. But when you define a new category and it turns out that there is a company who is already kind of doing that and it lands right on top of them, that's something I want to know about, especially when they happen to be one of the sponsors of this program, and that is Saltworks Security. And I am bringing on the founder and president of Saltworks Security today, Dennis Hurst, to actually help us unweave this basket of confusion about what is application security posture management. So in order to get to what we're talking about, let's just go ahead and bring on Dennis, shall we? Hey, Dennis, welcome back to the SMC Journal Podcast today.
Hey, Scott. How's it going?
Good. I am so glad to have you on today because as I start reporting more and more about security on this program, I'm coming across information I haven't heard before. And sometimes we get our information from the leading analysts like Gartner, Forrester, and others. And I've noticed that Gartner has this, what they're calling a new category called Application Security Posture Management. And that rings a bell with me because I know that's something where SaltMiner plays into that. And I figure you're the best person to talk about that. So I'd like for you to talk about this category. What do you know about it? And how does SaltMiner from Saltworks kind of play into this category?
Yeah, so the problem that Gartner, when they talk about application security posture management and what's the problem they're trying to solve, it's kind of an acknowledgement of where the application security industry is. So we have lots and lots of tools that scan lots and lots of things, and that's getting broader. Everything from code scanners to open source scanners to cloud container scanners. I mean, the list goes on, and it's a maturing space. I mean, dynamic scanning really came into being early 2000s, and lots of other types of technologies have come on. The challenge with that is, how do you take all of these tools that scan all of these different systems and aggregate that together and say, well, what do I fix today? Because ultimately what a company wants to know is, how do I reduce my risk? And that comes in many flavors. To a developer, it's, okay, of the 1,000 things you found, what should I go fix today? Or, how do I balance the risk of a vulnerability with the risk of not going live with a business system? And they're security risk and they're business risks. So how do we balance those? And that's a risk conversation. So application security posture management as a solution set or something that solves business problems really is around how do we aggregate findings from lots and lots of different tooling, all these scanners we bought that do lots of different things. How do we aggregate those into a central place with common meanings? So if I say something is a critical, that needs to have a definition. One tool might call critical, one may call it high. We are talking about vulnerabilities, which is a common thing, but there's subtleties of difference between, for example, a dynamic scan or a pen test result and a static scan. There's going to be differences of data types. So we've got to get all of that common into a common thing. We then have to layer onto that risk. So a vulnerability severity, for example, if I have a critical vulnerability, that really just tells me that this is a bad thing. It doesn't really tell me how much risk it has. So we could have a critical vulnerability, but it's on some internal system that doesn't have access to anything important, and it doesn't have any important data, and nobody can get to it from the outside world. So, it's not the thing you're going to not go to sleep overnight. Mm. On the other hand, you could have a lower level severity of vulnerability that's on a production web server, open to the internet, has highly critical data. Well, that's massive risk from a security and a business perspective when you get into fines and things. So we need to translate from vulnerability to risk. And risk is really a combination of the severity of the vulnerability. How bad is it? It's the exposure of it. Who can get to it? So what potential bad person can come and do something to you? It's the class of data that it's protecting. So what is this thing actually doing? Is it protecting banking information or PII, or is it just a bunch of marketing PDFs that are in draft mode and who cares if they get out into the public? So there's the severity of data that you're protecting. And then there's how long has it existed? How long has the vulnerability been there? I use the example of a critical vulnerability on a public website that's there for 15 minutes. Really wasn't that big of a deal. Mm-hmm. That was somebody misconfigured something. A critical vulnerability that's been around for 3 years, you probably should just go figure out how many times you've been breached at that point. So all of those things go into risk. So the next thing that application security posture management is trying to do is define a risk. Take a vulnerability, merge that with business data that comes in typically from like an application inventory where we have things like exposure and data classifications and those things. Apply a matrix to that so that we end up with a risk score for the vulnerability. So now we can say, well, is it really dangerous? Do I need to do something about it? Or where do I prioritize it? And now we've got something that's usable. Now we can say, oh, here's the 50 things we need to go get fixed today. These are the things that are truly bad for us. So application security posture management is kind of working our way up a stack from aggregating to risk clarifying. Now we've got to be able to communicate that out. So the next big thing that application security posture management would communicate it out. In security, I say we really ultimately only can do two things. I can find stuff and I can tell other people that's there so they hopefully go fix it. As a security engineer, I can't go edit somebody's code probably. Right. I mean, that's not my job. It's somebody else's job. Or I can't reconfigure a firewall because there's an operations team for that. So my job is to say, here's the risk to the business and communicate that effectively to the world so that we can then go fix it as a team. So that's the next big thing an application security posture management system is going to do is to take that risk-based data and communicate that effectively to the team. And that's a big statement. And if you look at how Gartner defines the space, a lot of it is around how we communicate. So that's going to be things like dashboards. It's going to be automated reporting. It potentially is triggers when big things are found so that you get a really fast feedback loop on new issues being found. And then it gets into integration with other systems. So if you're going to communicate with developers, the best way to do that is to push that information into their DevOps management tool or their quality testing tool. If you're talking about operational or production issues, you may need to go into your vulnerability management system. So a ServiceNow or some of the other systems. So there's the integration into other systems to take that data that's highly valuable and communicate it either through dashboards that people view, reports that they get emailed, or things that we push into other systems. And it's really important to be able to do that in the way that the consumer needs the data. So if I'm a developer, I want it in my DevOps tool. If I'm an operations group, I want it in my ticket tracking system. If I'm the executives of the company, I probably want summary dashboards that can show me how much risk do I have, and is that getting better or worse over time? Because that's really the thing from an audit risk compliance perspective. We want to know is, where are we today, and are we better than we were yesterday, and are we getting better tomorrow? It's the improvement trend. So that's kind of, and then like the last little level of application security posture management is automation. And that again also comes into a lot of integration points of things like, can I break a build pipeline? So if there's a vulnerability in an app that's going through a build pipeline, can I stop it? And that's just one example of automation where we can fix things. So to me, that's the stack, if you will, of application security posture management, is that technology stack that gives you all of that capability. And that aligns really closely to what Gartner's defined. We've talked in the past where we built SaltMiner to do this. We've been working on it for years. And then Gartner defined this space. And I think really it's not that we were visionaries or anything. It was that we work in an industry where these were business problems. And this was our way of trying to solve it for our customers. And Gartner, in talking to other customers, has discovered the same kind of problem. So I think it's not a revolutionary discussion. It's an evolutionary discussion. It's a maturing of an industry into something that is highly actionable.
That's really a lot of information, Dennis. So let me just step back for a moment and let me see if I can try to come back with what you just said sort of in a summary so I can understand it. You've already got all these people in your security department most likely using all of these tools to actually do the work, to do the scans, find out where the risks are and all this. And a product that supports ASPM is not one tool to rule them all. You're not going to get that. It is a way to organize the output from all of the effort being done with these tools and organize it in such a way that it brings out the risk and impacts of not doing something, the impacts of that risk with a business context in play. And it does that through various ways of reporting. Did I get that right? Or did I skip something?
Yeah, that you nailed it. I kind of think of it almost like a chat GPT type system. If we think of all of the search engine, all the crawlers, these are all technologies that gather data around the internet. Chat GPT, I can go to it and say, what time did the trains run in New York? And it's going out and aggregating tons of data to give you an answer to a question. In a similar way, we're doing the same thing of, exactly, there's lots of scanners, but I, as a developer or an executive, you want to ask the question, what should I fix today?
Right.
Like, what's the most important thing I can do today? It's a simple question, but it requires a lot of underlying technologies to answer it well and with rational,
So what you're telling me is that when we talk about your company and the building of SaltMiner, you recognize there was a hole that needed to be filled. Your customers were asking for something, and they were not only asking you, they were asking other people for it. You just decided to start building this thing, and now all of a sudden you find out Gartner's hearing that from other customers, and they need that as well. And It just sort of plays into exactly what you were planning on doing anyway. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. I think it was the natural evolution of, we help customers create application security programs, and other people did as well. And at the end of that, people want to be able to ask this holistic question of, okay, what do I fix today? Like, am I getting better? Am I getting worse? These really simple conceptual questions that you want to ask of any mature process. It's not, my background's industrial engineering. And if you think of a factory, I want to know, do I make cars with good quality? That's a very complicated question. Yes. But at the end of it, can somebody get in the car, turn the engine on, and drive it around and it works well? Like, it's a simple question with a lot of complexity. I think it's a sign of maturity. We saw the industrial world go through that maturity in the 80s and 90s. And I think it's a maturing of our industry to where we're answering better and more important questions that are based on this technology that we've built over decades, and now is mature enough to start asking these better questions.
It's interesting that you use the automotive industry to describe this and the maturity model, because coming from a quality assurance background in testing, I see so many parallels with what's going on in security testing, security penetration testing, and where we've come in automation for functional quality and performance. So this gets me thinking, okay, if you're organizing, you call it a vulnerability because that would be sort of an output of a scan. What are the vulnerabilities? I would say, okay, call that whatever you want to call it. If we think about the testing where we're trying to figure out functional defects and performance defects and other types of requirements we're trying to meet, and when we find this defect, that's an asset that comes out of testing for quality.
Right.
And so we have to organize all of that stuff too. And hopefully at the end of our testing, we've shown if you don't fix these defects, these are prioritized from high to low. And if you don't fix this is going to be the impact of your business for that. I see this as a parallel thing. So why isn't a product like SaltMiner, why is it any different than, say, a quality center where you're still organizing these assets and presenting a dashboard that shows business risk? Why is it not the same thing?
I think they're more complementary as opposed to why isn't it the same thing? In building SaltMiner, and I think other people probably found the same thing, a lot of the technical underlying challenges with building something like this is the data has to be designed in a way that it's highly, highly searchable. We have to massage the data, if you will, into data structures that are very searchable, very indexable, because in order to answer these complex questions, we're doing massive amounts of searching very rapidly. So almost like a Google kind of searching process. It's lots of data very fast, but it is technically unstructured data. Because again, we have some things that I would consider structured, like we have common vulnerability definitions or issue or defect definitions, but then every type of scan will have some nuance that's unique to itself. So all of those things need to be searchable, either at a high level or at a low level. And I think it goes back to why couldn't you use a lot of other systems? Other systems like Quality Center or Jira, some of the quality management tools. I would put in there the service ticket tracking systems. They're designed to look at the world from the perspective of what things does the human need to go fix, and let's track the life cycle of that. So it's a very something that's more attuned to like an accounting system. It's I have something and I opened a ticket and I changed a ticket and I commented on a ticket and I closed a ticket. More something that's going to be adaptable to a transactional database because it's a set of transactions. We found something, we fixed something, we validated something. When we look at something like what an ASPM is doing or SaltMiner is doing, the data is going to be more unstructured, and the focus is around searching and communicating, extremely fast searching. So I think that's a big architectural difference. And it sounds like a little nuanced thing, but when you get into the weeds of it, you find that speed of search and architecting the data in a way that is highly, highly searchable so that you can do all these other cool things really, really fast. Is kind of important. We actually have, so in SaltMiner, for example, we have a module that does penetration testing management. So it's going to conceptually kind of like a quality tracking tool. You can open vulnerabilities or defects, you call them either one, and you can track them. They have a life cycle. If my goal were to build just a pen testing tracking system, I wouldn't have done it the way we did it. We did it the way we did it because it needs to work in this alternative data model that's highly searchable. But it was more work. Honestly, it was harder because we were trying to do something that's more transactional in an unstructured data. There's lots of reasons we did it, and I think it worked great. But I think for the same reason, you wouldn't want to take your defect tracking system and give 10,000 users access to it and have them start querying it every day. It would probably crush it. It's an architectural difference between the value of a transactional database, which tracking systems tend to be, versus something that's optimized for search. We spend a tremendous amount of energy on search, whereas it's not really transactional data.
I see.
Way too nerdy of an answer, I know.
No, that's okay. Let's get back to the question about maturity, though, because I've seen where quality assurance should be very mature and can be very mature in some organizations. Unfortunately, doesn't really translate into real life because I talk to customers all the time, and I'm talking about
Oh yeah,
large customers. We're talking global 2000s, and you still
yeah.
wonder, like, is this still 1998? Because the way you're testing is still so far behind. But it could be very mature. Where do you think security plays in that? Are they even further behind the curve and they're trying to catch up, or can they be cutting edge like they
Um,
can in other areas?
but that's actually a really good question. I think there's a difference, and we run into this across a lot of things. So if you think about what an application security team has to do, they operate across a large company typically. So there's lots of development teams, lots of QA teams, lots of probably even operational teams. There could be different divisions that kind of do their own operational security things. The application security team can't change any of those things. We have to work within whatever exists. We have to go do our job within that, and that's going to mean that some, like you're saying, I'm sure you've seen this. You can have the same company, and one group is incredibly advanced, progressive, mature. Man, they are just awesome. And the next group is compiling stuff on somebody's desktop. It's
Right.
the Wild West, and that's the world you're in. Some are DevOps, some are waterfall. We can't change any of that as AppSec people. What we have to do is go work with what they have and complement it. So where maturity for us comes in is wherever the business is, and the business will be different across business units and divisions. Where the business is, we have to meet them there, take the data, and do all the things I've talked about, and then communicate back out in ways the business can consume the data. And again, that means that super advanced team probably wants an automated feed. That team that's compiling on somebody's desktop may want an email. So maturity from an application security perspective is about working with the various teams of the business where they're at today, bringing the data together, processing it in ways that can make risk-based decisions of what should be fixed and what shouldn't be fixed, and then communicating that back out to those teams effectively so that they can take action on it. So maturity is a little different. In a QA team or a performance team or a dev team, you can have a mature team regardless of the company. So an AppSec is it's really about being able to work with people where they're at and bring value and not have to. You can't say, well, everybody has to go be completely mature and then we can help you. No, you got to do it today.
Right.
So there are definite similarities, but there's differences too, because we do have to work across so many teams across the enterprise.
And just so people have an understanding, how big is this space right now for ASPM? Like, how many other players are there that have recognized this need that needs to be filled and are playing in the space?
In my opinion, there's probably about 4 or 5, really. It's kind of funny. This happens every time Gartner creates a space. You'll see lots of players go stick a label on something that
Oh yeah,
is
we
not
were
even.
always that, right?
Yeah, we've been doing that for 25 years.
Yeah.
I used to get tickled. I would walk around RSA, and everybody had the banner, application security, and I'm like, you do nothing in
Yeah.
application security. Yeah, I'm sure they do that in every industry. That's just mine. There's probably 5 or so. The biggest competitor for us really is home built, because again, these were problems people were seeing across the world. In lots of so when there were no solutions, people built their own solutions. So I think our value proposition is, hey, if you see the value of something like this, doesn't it make sense to buy a commercial product that's highly flexible and then build on top of that for the things that are unique to your business, as opposed to going at it from scratch? So I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of home built systems out there that have, some are good, some are challenged. They're all expensive in terms of time and money. So I think, but there's probably about 5 players in the space that are like serious, like we're getting serious about this.
So let's say somebody's watching because they tuned into I'm answering the question, what is application security posture management? They're like, we need this. We need this like right now. How do they find out more about SaltMiner and what's going on with what you're doing?
Yeah, just come to saltworks.io. Very
Okay.
easy.
And
Yep.
just check out the SaltMiner. Now you've got a demo out there, I'm sure, and you've got like do you have a free tier? Do you have a sign up period or something like that?
We do. We actually have a community version. So I mentioned briefly the penetration testing management platform that's built into SaltMiner. That came out of a realization that lots of our customers that were having this problem also had pen testers that needed to track stuff, and Excel is painful. So we built a full pen test tracking system. So you can actually use the community version, which is everything that SaltMiner does, just limited to penetration testing data.
Got
So
it.
they can use the full thing. And then if they want to do an evaluation against production systems, it's as simple as we send a license key and help them configure it. And then they can see the full blown product for, an appropriate amount of time, whatever makes sense. And we can work with them on that.
Awesome. I'll make sure that I share that on the show notes. Dennis, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us and explaining this so even somebody like me can understand it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It's been fun. I'll always enjoy getting on here.
All right. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks. Peace out.
You will hear me talk about this a lot when we talk about categories that have been created, whether Gartner calls it a category or whether the market defines it as a category. The company that begins to own a category, maybe starts the category, generally has the market share, and everybody else tends to feed from the under the table, the crumbs. And that is something that a person I respect highly, Christopher Lochhead, who talks about on his podcast. He was the chief marketing officer of Mercury back in the day and kind of led them to that $1 billion company market share that they had back in the day. And he is always talking about category owners, category creators. They're the ones that generally own that. And if you think about that from Uber's perspective, when you start thinking about things as verbs, like I'm going to Google something, I'm not going to search something, obviously Google has that market. And when other companies begin to start comparing themselves by using that same terminology, like OpenAI recently, everybody's talking about ChatGPT. So when you see a press release come out that says this is Google's ChatGPT, well, they're already acknowledging that OpenAI has actually cornered that particular market category. I think this is kind of the case for ASPM as well. So I'm going to be curious to see how this matures, how SaltMiner as a product matures, and how Saltworks Security takes on this role as the leader for ASPM. What do you think about it? Are you familiar with this term ASPM, and are you currently, do you need that kind of solution? I'd like to get your feedback on this. You can reach me on most social media platforms, LinkedIn being the primary one that I use, but if you scan that QR code, it'll take you to a bio page with many links of how you can get in touch with me. But you can also send me an email to my email address at heyscott@smcjournal.com. Love to hear what you have to say. What do you think about this video? If you like it, be great if you gave it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That really helps us in many ways that you may never understand. But thank you so much for watching today. For this episode of the SMC Journal podcast, this is Scott Moore saying we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.